We begin the chapter with Richard sitting by himself on a rock thinking about the problem he is having, and while he leans against that cold, chilled rock, he is met with a faint blowing, icy wind. We quickly learn all of them agree standing watch in shifts throughout the night is wise. We also learn Chase has placed himself in charge of who gets what shift and when those changes will occur. While setting the watch order, Chase decides Richard will take the first watch, followed by Zedd, with him covering the third and final shift. Kaylin objects to Chase, deciding she doesn't get a watch. Richard stares out into the scenic landscape and notices what a pleasant-looking place this is, considering how close it is to the boundary. He also feels bad for the destruction of the woods created by Dark and Rawl putting the boxes of Orden in play. He imagines a forest in its natural and undisturbed state, wondering how beautiful it was before it was destroyed. Chase tells Richard it is unlikely the Hearthounds will reach this far, but Richard isn't taking any chances. He holds the Sword of Truth in his hand for reassurance and scans the countryside, vigilant and watchful for any threat. Instead of catching up on some much-needed rest, as Chase suggested, with the assignment of the night's watch, Kaylin stays up late to have an important conversation with Richard about what happened earlier. For a time, she only sits next to him, holding close to warmth, unintentionally jabbing Richard in the side with her knife handle, which he ignores because he doesn't want her to move away. Richard makes conversation by asking Kaylin if everyone else is asleep, wondering how she can know for sure if Zedd is sleeping because he sleeps with his eyes open. Kaylin tells him all wizards do this, not just Zedd. Zedd is quick-witted, aware, and fast, even while he's fast asleep. Kaylin tells Richard that she came to him in the night to apologize for telling him she wouldn't have wanted to come after her. And then she drops the F-bomb on him. Kaylin tells Richard she appreciates his friendship twice. And she says what they are doing is more important than one person, even if that person is herself. Richard senses that she isn't giving it to him straight, so he asks her to explain a bit more, specifically the "do you have a boyfriend or husband waiting for you back at home" part of it. Kaylin lies to Richard and herself when she tells him he asked a question which does not have a simple yes or no answer. Richard picks up on this immediately and says yes it is, either she does or she doesn't. He observes and praises her intelligence, wit, and courage, all the qualities she possesses in tremendous amounts. Richard repeats the lie he told himself in the last chapter over his exclusive ownership and participation in the special smile she gave only to him, which, spoiler alert, does evolve over time into something more accurate. Richard shows good judgment when he doesn't interpret her body language as the last thing, and after the last things she said when they were just friends, as an invitation for the old, "let me just yawn and put my arms around you" gag. Kaylin tells Richard Chase warned her the next 2 days were going to be difficult, and it might be a good idea for her to get some sleep instead of taking a shift with Richard during the night's watch. Richard realizes she is trying to decide what she is and isn't okay sharing with him, and he isn't a part of that conversation. Only she has ownership of her consent. Richard reminds her of her obligation to him and says he expects her to keep her promise. And Kaylin let Richard know that she feels badly about the whole not being able to express any affection towards him by expressing affection towards him when she kisses her fingers and puts it on his cheek. Richard thinks about this for a long time as he suffers from withdrawal and unrequited love. Having been left alone by Kaylin, with only the stars to watch him, Richard decides to pull out his sword and start polishing it because he has nothing better to do. I'm serious. That's almost verbatim the words of the text. Go check it out for yourself if you don't believe me. Richard asks the single most important question the symbolic representation of integrity can ask itself. What is the sword perceiving in him? Richard, unsure of what the answer is, puts the sword away and his anger with it. While he doesn't say so out loud, Richard accepts he's being irrational and replaces the sword's comforting, misplaced, and counterproductive anger with the gloom and solitude of inconsolable heartbreak. With about an hour left in his watch, Richard hears familiar footsteps approaching. Zedd approaches in simple robes, carrying enough cheese for 2 people. Richard asks, "What's this all about then?" And Zedd says he wanted to keep him company because he's been having a rough couple of days, with the whole end of the world and almost being killed so many times. Not to mention the pretty girl on the horse who says she won't be his girlfriend. Zedd tries his best to make Richard feel better by offering him some cheese. Richard isn't hungry for cheese, but he does accept Zedd's offer of friendly company. Zedd does the most important thing another person can do when communicating with another human being. He attempts to understand where the person is coming from. Zedd shows his desire to understand Richard by asking him to explain what is the matter, and he doesn't stop until Richard gets to the heart of the matter. He tells Zedd he is convinced Kaylin likes him back, but doesn't understand why she's keeping him at arm's length. Zedd is not telling Richard the truth when he tells Richard he can't be with Kaylin. Richard knows Kaylin likes him, and he feels like there must be a way to get around whatever's keeping them apart if he can just figure out the right answer and piece it together. Zedd weaves a beautiful tapestry of seamless cognitive manipulation on Richard to help him find the answers he needs. Since this tapestry is so well woven, the different strategies of cognitive influence are mixed in and melded with each other. Zedd says, "She is other things and has responsibilities. She is afraid of losing your friendship. She is not the one for you. She can't be that. You just have to trust me. She cannot be what you want. Find another girl. Pick another. That doesn't change the facts, Richard! Exclamation point. It will not work out between the two of you. I wish it were so. There is no way for it to work. I wish it were so, but it is just not. Just be her friend. You can be nothing more." He also takes some time to reinforce and validate the reasons Richard feels like Kaylin is the right person for him when he says, "She's a good girl. We all like her. She cares about you more than she should. She's a wonderful person." Zedd admits that if a trusted person told him to ignore his feelings about his wife, he would not have listened. Zedd tells Richard things he knows he believes to strengthen his belief in those things. The entire deal where Richard asks him one question and swears Zedd to honesty to prove his point is a con game run by the first wizard himself. He sets himself up as the fall guy so Richard can use that victory to feel even more sure about his position than he was before. Try reading this section again without Zedd to distract you and watch how Richard's thoughts are guided by Zedd's interaction. Here are some of the high points in Richard's feedback to him. "Everyone knows her secrets but me, and she shouldn't worry about losing my friendship. It won't happen. I'll agree with you if you answer my question, right? If someone asked you to pick someone other than your wife, would you? I thought as much. You said it yourself. I'm the seeker. There's a way. I will find it." At the end of the conversation, Richard is more resolute and focused than he was before asking Zedd to explain to him why he was wrong. After he's finished having advanced psychological tactics used on him by his grandfather, Richard asks Zedd why he really came out here to talk to him. Richard says, "Oi, Zedd, what's all this about then?" And Zedd says, "Can't an old man come and sit with his grandson without an ulterior motive?" And Richard says, "Zedd, I have ironclad evidence which proves you have an ulterior motive for coming here." And Zedd says, "Richard, you aren't going to believe this, but I have an ulterior motive for coming here." Zedd tells Richard the seeker of truth almost made a big mistake. Richard says, "Zedd, you aren't going to believe this, but I almost made a big mistake today by going after Chase." And Zedd says, "Richard, I can't believe this. You knew it was a bad decision. You almost did it anyways." Richard accepts Zedd's counsel regarding one bad decision. But Zedd isn't finished because he needs to warn Richard that as the seeker of truth, there will be innocent people along the way who are suffering. Zedd tells Richard it's vitally important to remember the laws of cause and effect. There will be cries for help, which he will have the power to answer. However, by answering those cries for help, he will lose focus on the larger issue at stake and be vulnerable to that which can destroy him. And Darkenrahl will have no problem using the suffering of innocent people to manipulate him into destroying himself. Zedd is talking about the weaponization of good intentions. Zedd says, "They think no plant should be allowed to grow taller than the shortest." And he goes on to say people would cast another into the fire to burn rather than light a candle themselves. He goes on to say there is never a shortage of people who passionately and personally believe they are good and just and will fight for whatever lies make them feel like they are doing good. Richard tells Zedd he's having a hard time figuring out why people would ever agree to follow someone who's doing terrible things. Zedd's answer is simple. When a person is willing to surrender their free will with the higher power of that which makes them feel good must be good, they believe any lie told to them, claiming that they are the voice of good. Zedd says if the opponent is stronger, you have to be smarter if you want to win. Richard makes an error of correlation without causation when he says, "I've really got my balls in a vice here because I can't kill Darkenrahl." Zedd says, "Richard, I know you feel like you've got your balls in a vice, but not being able to use the sword to kill Darkenrahl is not an inability to kill Darkenrahl." Richard accepts Zedd's chain of logic and asks him if he ever had to let innocent people die. Zedd tells him he has in the past during the Great War against Panis Rahl, and right now while Darkenrahl kills people to try and find out who he is. He says he does have the power to surrender himself and stop people from being killed. But that would prevent him from using his unique knowledge and talents to stop him from killing an even greater number of people. Zedd says regardless of his feelings about the situation, if he's going to act like he cares about protecting life, then he must do so from a position which acts like he's caring about protecting life. Zedd says it's a painful choice to let a few die horribly, or to let even more die horribly. Richard tells Zedd that Kaelin has chosen to let others die in an attempt to save lives for everyone else. For Kaelin to make it through the boundaries, Shar's life was forfeit. Zedd offers knowing sympathy and tells Richard, while we all hurt for different reasons, the hurt is the same. Richard tells Zedd he tried to offer one of the apples in his backpack to Kaelin, and Zedd laughs because red fruit in the Midlands is poison, and he was essentially giving her a death threat. Richard tells his grandfather, Zedd, you aren't going to believe this, but Kaelin made a mistake by letting me live when she suspected I was trying to poison her. Zedd tells his grandson, Richard, you aren't going to believe this, but Kaelin's secret powers, which only she is allowed to tell you about, meant she was in full control of the situation and can afford to give you a chance to explain yourself. Zedd puts Richard in a difficult spot by asking him if everything was on the line, and he suspected but didn't know Zedd might be a traitor to their cause, a threat to all life, if he would be able to use lethal force against him. Richard tries to cop out of the situation by arguing against the initial conditions. He said Zedd would never do anything to betray him or his cause, and Zedd tells him he isn't playing by the rules of what if, and he's missing the point of the exercise. The true meaning behind the wizard's 8th rule: deserve victory. If Richard is going to put himself in the position he is in, he has no business at all being in that position if he can't make that decision. Poop or get off the pot, Richard, but no one can pinch that turd off for you. And even if it hurts, even if it strains, even if it makes you feel like you're giving birth and getting lightheaded and you're gonna pass out, the way is the way, and what is. Richard can't help himself and looks to Zedd for some strength. He asks if Zedd would be able to do this to him if the situation were reversed, and Zedd tells him, absent pride or joy, he would do so in an instant. Richard accepts all of this and tells Zedd he is resolute but scared. Richard turns the topic of conversation to deadly fruit problem in the Midlands, and he asks why red fruit is poison. Zedd tells him Panis Ral got his hands on some magic that he was able to use to turn red fruit poisonous. The reason he chose red fruit was because he knows children will be poisoned by it. Zedd describes the poison as slow-acting and difficult to trace, causing fevers and eventually death. Zedd says a lot of people died, just not children. Zedd tells a story about someone he liked and trusted being spotted with magic that they had no business messing with. He says he thought something was wrong and wanted to say something, but by the time he decided to say something, he found out it was too late. His failure to follow the advice he gave Richard came with a terrible price. One life was spared in the moment, and likely thousands of children lost their lives as a result. Richard asks why Westland wasn't affected by this magic, and Zedd tells him it's because all magic has limits. Richard asks if it's possible to reverse the spell, and Zedd says if they can survive this whole crazy dark and raw thing, he'll give it his best shot. Richard asks if it's possible to reverse the spell, and Zedd says if they can survive this whole crazy dark and raw thing, he'll give it his best shot. Richard has a lot of problems, and he remembers that solutions are the solution to most problems. He asks Zedd to do something about the cloud that is following him. Zedd says Richard is right, but he doesn't know how the cloud is attached to him, so he needs to figure something else out. Zedd asks about the weather, and Richard can't remember there being any rain near him since his father's murder, or even any clouds nearby. Zedd reasons that Dark and Raw has put a spell on the cloud following him, which pushes the other clouds away so he can find it easily. Richard, having never learned to study or heard about magic in his entire life, tells Zedd he could put a stronger spell on the cloud to draw the other clouds to it instead of repel them. And if Dark and Raw isn't paying attention when he tries to push the clouds away, the stronger spell will break the hook on the cloud attached to him. Zedd is incredulous, shocked, surprised even, and expresses this with a single swear before telling Richard he has the right idea and would make an excellent wizard. Richard says he already has one impossible job, causing Zedd to frown. His dreams of having his beloved grandson follow along in the family business of knowing about magic and making fresh apple juice every day. While Zedd is happy to see him, that really is a wizard rock in his pocket, and he whips it out in front of his grandson and lets it drop to the ground with a small thud. After spinning his fingers around it several times, it grows and expands, finally stopping once it is many times its original size. Richard is surprised because he recognizes it, and much like a grandson speaking to his grandfather over an alphabet pop-up book, Richard describes what is in front of him. Richard says, "That's your cloud rock." And much like a grandfather spending time teaching his grandson what the pictures in the pop-up book mean, Zedd corrects him and gives him the proper term, wizard's rock, instead. Zedd uses some magic to get the rock ready, producing lights, colors, and the smell of a fresh spring rain. Zedd tells Richard, "Step right up, my boy, and experience the genuine, bona fide, electrified, grand unification with nature wizard's experience." Richard steps right up and does all the women in the audience, and some of the men, not that there's anything wrong with that, a giant favor by imagining himself laying naked in the hot summer sun with his rippling six-pack abdominal muscles and chiseled jaw. Richard copies the same form he has seen from Zedd over and over growing up. He describes feeling like he is floating on water, but really he is floating on light. Richard feels a rush of exhilaration, his mind clear and connected to everything around him. Still naked, with all the nature circling around him, he understands the tall grass, the bugs, the birds, the animals, the water, and the air. He understands how they're all connected to each other. Even though all outward appearances make them appear to be separate things, he understands how the different parts of nature seem to always be strategically placed so that no matter where the camera is, there's always a tree, a bird, or conveniently placed rock to keep his good and plenties left to the reader's imagination. Richard describes himself as inconsequential yet empowered. He sees the world through the eyes of every living creature, seeing the world through their eyes instead of his own, gaining knowledge, insight, and empathy. He understands their joy, their fear, their desire, which all exist and melt into nothingness. He feels like the only living thing in the universe. Richard sees this and sees the world through the eyes of others. And this is a moment he truly understands how big, beautiful, and malleable the world is. The possibilities are endless. Zedd throws some magic dust in the air, which circles around Richard, concentrating around his chest before it travels up through the connection between Richard and the cloud tethered to him. The dust reaches the cloud, sparkling inside it, and drawing lightning from across the entire horizon in a profound and shameless display of nature's primal force. The lightning which spans to the horizon is symbolic of the full unleashed potential which was always present yet dormant. Suddenly the lightning stops, the lights fade, and a fully clothed Richard is left standing in the quiet night air with only his grandfather to share the experience with. Zedd is already smiling because he knows exactly what Richard is going through in this moment and Richard says, "That was incredible. I never felt anything like that in my entire life." Zedd tells Richard he has the talent for it, if not the training, and even though he shows great potential, there is still the matter of his clothing getting in the way of the experience. Richard asks if the clothing makes such a big difference, and Zedd tells him it makes all the difference, and learning how to do this without clothing makes the experience even better. Richard thanks Zedd, who tells him to hit the road and get some sleep, before offering him the job as a wizard again, saying he would be proud to welcome him into the Brotherhood. Zedd follows up his sales pitch of giving Richard access to nigh unlimited clarity of mind and interconnectivity of thought between all things living and dead by demonstrating to him you can also use wizard powers to summon nearby cheese.